Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we're going to dive into something that literally affects every single one of us every single day. We're looking at a fascinating concept all about the emotional climate of our workplaces and our homes. It's called thermostats and thermometers, the art of cultural regulation. It's really all about how we influence or, are influenced by the spaces we inhabit. So get ready because this is going to completely change how you look at leadership and emotional intelligence. I want you to take a second and just think back. Have you ever walked into a room, maybe stepped into your office on a Monday morning, or sat down at a big, crowded family dinner, and instantly, without a single word being spoken, you just felt the tension, like you could practically cut it with a knife? You have this incredibly visceral experience of sensing the room's energy the absolute second you cross the threshold. We've all been there. And that feeling you're picking up on, well, that's the cultural temperature of the environment. Every single cultural environment has one. Sometimes it manifests as this frigid, freezing chill of anxiety, right? Where everyone is just terrified to make a move. Other times it's boiling over into a total fever pitch of pure, unadulterated stress. We naturally feel it in our bones when things are freezing with anxiety or running way too hot with pressure. So let's break this down. Section 1. The room's temperature. Measuring the cultural climate. Which leads us directly into Section 2, the thermometer leader, the passive observer. Okay, let's dive right into this. The reality is that most people who occupy high-stress rooms act as passive instruments. They're just existing in the space, absorbing whatever energy is thrown at them. And this beautifully sets up the core metaphor we're unpacking today. A thermometer leader is essentially a mirror leader. They just reflect whatever environment they're put into. If the team is panicked, the leader becomes frantic. If the collective energy is low, the leader gets lethargic. Now, it's important to note these leaders might be highly empathetic. They definitely feel what you're feeling. But the catch? They completely lack the agency to actually influence the outcome. What's really interesting is how easily we can spot these behaviors in everyday life. Let's look at the diagnostic signs. First, they are highly reactive. A thermometer leader's mood might depend entirely on, say, the latest KPI report they just read, or a single Slack message that pops up on their screen. Second, they echo chamber. Instead of offering a real solution, they just repeat and amplify the frustrations of the group. And third, they're constantly fluctuating. They offer zero stability because they're continually rising and falling based on whatever external pressures happen to hit them that day. But thankfully, there's an antidote to this chaos. Section 3. The thermostat leader, the active agent. This is the calm, measured, and authoritative presence in the room that operates on a completely different paradigm. Unlike the thermometer, a thermostat leader has a predefined set point. They possess a very clear internal vision of exactly what the culture should look and feel like, whether that's calm, focused, or high energy. And rather than just passively recording the room's temperature, they use their agency to actively work and bring the room to that specific cultural level. And this brilliantly illustrates the difference. A thermometer leader just records the temperature. They're a passive observer. But the thermostat leader, they change the temperature. They're an active agent. One simply tells you how hot it is, while the other actually does something about it to make the room comfortable again. So how exactly do they do it? Well, it's all about the mechanics of active agency. If the room is overheating with intense conflict, a thermostat leader recognizes this and deliberately blows in the cool air of mediation to bring the temp down. On the flip side, if the team is freezing up, completely paralyzed by the fear of failure, the thermostat leader notices that drop in temperature and cranks up the warmth of encouragement. They're constantly adjusting to maintain the ideal climate. This brings us to a crucial point, what we call the thermostat principle. Leadership isn't about being influenced by the environment, it's about being the influence on the environment. This right here is the absolute central driving philosophy of our entire explainer today. It's a fundamental shift from being a victim of your surroundings to actually being the architect of them. So, how do we make that shift? Section 4. Resetting your internal dial from theory to practice. Let's move to this and see how it builds. Now that we understand the philosophy, how do you actually become this active agent? How do you stop being at the mercy of the room's chaos? There's a clear 3-step roadmap to reset your internal dial. Step 1, define your set point. Step 2, manage the drafts. And step 3, practice emotional decoupling. Let's look at each of these right now. Starting with step 1, define your set point. The logic here is super simple. You can't possibly regulate a room if you don't actually know what the ideal temperature should be. You have to decide on your core values. Ask yourself, is your leadership set point going to be relentless optimism, or maybe it's analytical calm? Once you clearly define what that looks like, you make it your default mode. You commit to that setting regardless of the severe weather happening outside. Moving to step 2, manage the drafts. In any organization or family, there are everyday organizational drafts. Think of them like open windows that let the essential heat and energy right out of the room. These drafts show up as office gossip, pervasive negativity, or just a severe lack of clarity. A true thermostat leader establishes firm boundaries to seal these leaks. They actively spot these open windows and shut them through incredibly clear communication. And finally, step 3, which honestly might be the most challenging but also the most impactful. Practice emotional decoupling. You have to learn to separate your internal peace from the external chaos. Think about it this way. When a thermometer is tossed into boiling water, it literally shatters and breaks. But when a thermostat is placed in a hot room, it simply goes to work. Decoupling allows you to maintain your logic and your strategy while everyone else around you is just reacting emotionally. Bringing us to our final takeaway, Section 5, the bottom line, breathing, working, and thriving. Why is this transformation from a passive mirror into an active regulator so incredibly crucial for our modern teams, our families, and our workplaces? Well, it's about creating spaces where people are actually breathing, working, and thriving. Listen, the world has enough thermometers. Anyone, and I mean anyone, can tell you when it's cold outside. It takes absolutely no special talent whatsoever to point out that a team is highly stressed or that a project is failing. Pointing out the problem is easy. We're surrounded by people who can do that. What we desperately need are leaders who can walk into a room of chaos and through the sheer force of their character and clarity, bring the temperature back to a place where people can truly thrive. So I want to leave you with this provocative final thought. Next time you walk into a chaotic room, what instrument will you be? Will you just reflect the panic, or will you set the temperature? Thank you so much for exploring this with me today. Take this concept into your week and start actively regulating the spaces you lead.